makes an X-Men team scary? A bleak, post-apocalyptic setting, villainous mutant members, full-body fishnets? How about all this and more? There isn't really an exact X-Men team in this reality, but there are the Force Warriors, so I guess we could consider them as an X-Men alternate? In Age of X, we learn of Earth 11326. Here, there was no Professor Xavier to bring mutants together, uniting them. As a result, anti-mutant sentiments grew, and following the Phoenix disaster, mutants were on the brink of extinction in the US, thanks to national and honestly global persecution. However, some were able to rise up and join the Mutant Liberation Front, fighting to protect their kind. Eventually, the mutants were unified by Magneto, who brought them together at a place he built called Fortress X. During the siege of the fortress, each night barriers protecting the place would be rebuilt by the Force Warriors, a team of psionic mutant powerhouses including Legion, Hellion, Betsy Braddock's Psylocke, Carmela Unnasion's Standoff, and finally, Rachel Summers' Revenant. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love when we talk about alternate versions of alternate characters, well, guess what? We got a whole playlist filled with that, so you can go check that out and learn even more. Number 9, Witchbreed. The Witchbreed hails from Earth 311. They are mutants of that reality. Witchbreed is a term given to anyone who basically, kind of has powers in that reality, but while some of these characters are villains, not all of them are bad. In fact, the Witchbreed team is made up of mutants who attempt to help others who are good and yet who are mistreated just because of who they are, like them. The Earth 311 reality is known as 1602, named after the year it's set in. The team here is led by Carlos Xavier, and members include the Angel, Hal McCoy, Petro, Sister Wanda, Scotty Summerisle, Roberto Trefusis, and Jean Grey, who is disguised as a boy and going by John Grey. Number 8, Hellions. Okay, so this one isn't technically an alternate version of the X-Men, but they are from the main continuity. But even discounting that, because I have talked about main reality alternate versions of the X-Men in the past and included them on my list, counting them according to my own self-defined parameters for the list, this team also isn't technically a version of the X-Men specifically. They're just a different mutant group in the main continuity. But I love them so much, and they are a mutant team, and they certainly can be scary if you get on their bad side. Hellions is a team that was made up of those mutants that Krakoa didn't quite know what to do with, considering them too troublesome to deal with. As such, Mr. Sinister suggested that they ban these problematic, less stable mutants together, petitioning to have them as his own team that he could then, rehabilitate. Use! Under the leadership of Quanon, who goes by Psylocke, herself considered a somewhat problematic mutant due to her past and her weird connection for many years with Betsy Braddock, who is now Captain Britain. This team is probably one of my favorite mutant teams I have ever read in the comics, and despite them all kind of being scarily unhinged at the start, I came to love every single member of this team by the end of this series. This version of the Hellions includes Wild Child, Orphan Maker, Nanny, John Greycrow, Havoc, and a former member of Emma Frost's Hellions, Empath. Number 7, Naughty X-Men. I don't know, just the idea that this team exists out there in the multiverse kind of scares me. It's not so much that these X-Men were created to be a sexy variant. It's more that they hail from the bizarre world of the Mojoverse. But also, think of the ratings! Initially, I of course thought that Mojo had created them solely for that purpose, but apparently he did not. They were simply an alternate version of the team that auditioned to replace the Earth 616 team after they seemingly died. Even Mojo wasn't feeling it and ordered them to be dumped, likely implying that they should be permanently removed after they auditioned for him. Number 6, Marvel Zombies. What makes the Marvel Zombies reality version of the X-Men so scary? How about the fact that most of them were killed off and those that did survive became bloodthirsty zombies? I think the idea of that should be enough to make your blood run cold. Marvel Zombies is a brutal reality known as Earth Z or Earth 2149. While we don't know much about what this world was like before the zombies arrived, it's expected that for the most part it was pretty similar to Earth 616, except for a few minor differences as far as I can tell. The X-Men end up getting attacked early on by Alpha Flight, and those members of the team that survive then go on to fight alongside one of the last standing mutants of the living, Magneto, who becomes sort of like their new leader in this reality. Also, I gotta say, you know you're in some bleak reality when Magneto becomes the leader of the X-Men. I feel like I have yet to see a reality where he leads the X-Men that is without some extreme element of darkness, other than of course the main continuity. Number 5, Dark Reign. During the Dark Reign event, we didn't just have a Dark Avengers team. We also had a Dark X-Men team as well. Dark Reign was an event that happened in 2009. It followed Secret Invasion. After Norman Osborn was broadcast on live television taking out the threat of the Skrull Queen Varanki, who led the Skrull invasion of Earth, Norman was celebrated as a hero. Surprised? I know. He was made the head of the organization created to replace S.H.I.E.L.D., which at this time was fully debunked. Norman named his organization Hammer and created his own Dark Avengers team. As with his Dark Avengers team, the Dark X-Men team members were also selected by Osborn. For the most part, anyway. The team included Mystique, Emma Frost, who was Black Queen at the time, Namor, Dawkins Wolverine, Mimic, Omega, Cloak, and Dagger, who have both been, I think, disputed mutants in the past, and the alternate version of Hank McCoy, known as Dark Beast, who hails from the Age of Apocalypse reality. Number 4. New Dark X-Men. Madeline Pryor leads this new team of Dark X-Men. The team was put together by her when she felt compelled to take action. As Madeline says to Havoc in issue number 1 of Dark X-Men, "You should know by now that I'll wage war against anyone if I think it's just." Donning her new Crown of Mercy. Yep, Maddie gets her own team of X-Men in the second volume of Dark X-Men, which began just this year in 2023. As of issue number 2, the team has grown to include Havoc, Gambit, Maggot, Azazel, Monet's brother Marius St. Croix as M-Plate, New Mutant Feint from Children of the Atom, where she was formerly introduced as Gimmick, and Zero, who actually possesses Wolverine's android clone, Albert. What a weird, wacky series. I really need to add this one to my reading list. Sounds great to me. Number 3, Gamma Earth. The fate of the X-Men here was tragic, hence why I'm including them here on my list. They hail from the reality we get a glimpse into in Donny Cates and Ryan Ottley's Hulk series from 2021, and it's issue number 5. Here we get to see what a future world is like after it has been fully gamma irradiated thanks to gamma bombs that went off the world over. This is because in this reality, Banner was able to test the bomb, not needing to actually save Rick Jones. As such, the bomb testing continued to the point that the weapon was perfected, handed over to the US military. They used it to do things like wipe out all mutants, considering them a threat. Yikes. Number 2, Reichsmen. The Reichsmen come from a world where Germany and Axis won during World War II. They made their first appearance in Excalibur Weird War 3, issue number 1, and they are about as weird and disturbing as you would imagine them to be. This reality, Earth 597, is also home to the disturbing alternate version of the Excalibur team known as the Lightning Force. The Reichsmen are led by Herr Moira McTaggart, Reichsminister of Genetics, with the team including alternate versions of Havoc, Psylocke, Rogue, Storm, and Banshee. Number 1, Days of Future Past. This X-Men team did not fare so well, so they literally reached back into the past to get help so that their future could be prevented from ever coming to pass. In this reality, known as Days of Future Past, named after the story it appears in, or as designated reality number Earth 811, mutants end up being hunted down by Sentinels who take over. Not only are the X-Men almost all gone or dead or otherwise locked up and contained for being mutants, as well as all of the mutant population, stripped of their rights and freedoms, but non-mutant superheroes were also wiped out as well. It's truly a bleak reality. This team of X-Men is able to get a message back to their past selves thanks to the help of Wolverine, who breaks them out, giving Rachel Summers and Kitty Pryde in this timeline enough cover for Kitty to travel back in time through her own consciousness.
And at number 10, Angel of Earth 311. This version of Angel, known as Werner, appears on Earth 311, the Marvel 1602 universe in which all of the Marvel characters exist in the year 1602. Mutants are referred to as witch breed, and the Catholic Church considers them to be devil worshippers hunting them down. Generally, if a witch breed could pass as a human, the Inquisitor Enrique, the alternate of Magneto on this Earth, would let them survive, with the intention of having them join his brotherhood of those who will inherit the Earth. That is actually the name of his brotherhood. Werner had special garments that his mother had made him that hid his wings, but eventually he was found out and fled. The Inquisition, though, threatened that if he did not return, they would kill his mother. So he obeyed, yet they killed her anyway. He was tied up in chains, set to be burned at the stake. That's where the frightful part of his story ends, luckily, with him eventually being rescued and saved from death by the equivalents of Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Iceman. Speaking of Cyclops, though, in at number 9, Cyclops of Earth 200524. This version of Cyclops is gross rather than scary. Hailing from Earth 200524 from the comics, this Cyclops has an eye infection, and the results ain't pretty to say the least. That's pretty much his whole shtick. The what, huh? Comics are parody comics. Like what, huh? But like what? They're parody comics, written in a similar vein as the What If stories, except with a much more comedic spin. Earth 200524 appears in the very first issue of Volume 1 of What Huh? And features the likes of stories titled What If the Avengers All Had Beards? What if DC let us do Batman Daredevil as a crossover? And what if Black Panther were actually white? Yeah, I think you guys probably get the vibe of what they were going for. Moving on to number 8, Robert Drake of Earth 51518. This version of Bobby Iceman Drake comes from the remnants of the Age of Apocalypse reality, remnants which were salvaged by God Emperor Doom and made into a part of his battle world. It's referred to as the domain of Apocalypse. Now, Iceman has a gruesome reality. Appearing in Old Man Logan issue 2 back in 2015, this Iceman encountered one of Apocalypse's horsemen, Sabretooth, in the Savage Land, and then was seemingly killed by another horseman, Holocaust, who erupted into atomic fire which engulfed the land and Robert. While his teammates were dead, it was revealed that poor Bobby Drake survived, having become a form of pure moisture, which would then evaporate and reconsolidate into a rainstorm that then poured over the X-Men as they fought Apocalypse. Talk about a jarring existence. He's also a much cruder looking version of the character than we're normally used to. And at 7, Ruins Kitty Pryde. Ruins is one of the most depressing series in the Marvel multiverse. It's tragic as hell, and most of our favorite characters have suffered from terrible fates in this timeline. Ruins takes place on Earth 9591, a place in which all mutants had horrible side effects with their powers. We actually mentioned the version of Professor X on our last part. He became the US president who would then hold mutants in a Texan prison, ordering for them to be experimented on and disfigured for their own good. Kitty Pryde is one of those mutants. She's imprisoned and, in an attempt to escape, uses her phasing powers, but that does not go as planned. Instead, when she's phasing, she gets stuck halfway through a door, causing her to lose 3 feet of her intestines in the process. We never see her die on panel, but it's assumed that, losing a whole 3 out of the 20 feet of intestines that one has inside their body surely wouldn't have the greatest of side effects. There's some science facts for you. We have 20 feet of intestines inside of our bodies. And at number 6, Hellverine. Hellverine is actually a character who appears on Earth 616. He comes to be after Wolverine's soul was dragged to hell and an unnamed demon decides to take over his body. His whole mission is to ruin everything Wolverine likes in his life, including people. Hellverine starts his crusade by going after a pastor that Wolverine had just met prior, covering the pastor's body with insects and stabbing him through the chest, then going over to his church, spraying acid all over it and burning it to the ground while the congregation was inside. Yeah, dark, huh? Luckily, he doesn't get very far when he encounters X-23, who manages to defeat him. Despite that, Hellverine goes after the X-Men and almost murders Colossus. He's captured by Mystique, and a ritual is performed to bring Wolverine's soul back to his body. Once Wolverine has returned, he and Hellverine duke it out inside of his body, and eventually Jean Grey is able to force the demon out and back to hell. And at 5, Ultimates Nightcrawler. The Ultimates universe, aka Earth 1610, is filled with a whole lot of fascinating but often meaner versions of beloved Marvel characters. Nightcrawler Kurt Wagner definitely falls into that category. Kurt grew up in the Bavarian mountains but was kidnapped for the Weapon X program in his early formative years. He was forced into becoming a mutant agent for them. Once free of the program, he joined up with the X-Men and was generally well liked until, well, he turned out to be a total dick. After he befriended Colossus, the metal mutant came out to him telling Kurt that he was gay. Turns out the Ultimates version of Kurt is a bit of a homophobe and was disgusted by Colossus, telling him that he was dead to him. He eventually grew very lonely and then kidnapped his crush, Dazzler, who at the time was dating Angel, all as a scheme to manipulate her to love him instead. The X-Men had to go after him to rescue Dazzler, and Xavier had to put Kurt into a coma in order to rehabilitate him. And at number 4, The Fallen from Earth 1298. We've got another alternative Warren Worthington III on our list, this time from the Mutant X reality. Now on this Earth, Warren has a very different transformation into one of Apocalypse's horsemen. Rather than being Archangel, he became something referred to as the Fallen. No longer did he have his angelic wings. Instead, his skin became incredibly pale and his wings became bat-like, and he was able to breathe fire. Warren, thanks to this transformation, becomes completely conflicted, eventually giving into all of his dark urges, turning against his allies and becoming completely cruel and merciless. It even got to the point that no one trusted him anymore, friend or foe. Moving on to number 3, Charles Xavier from Earth 20329. This Xavier comes from an Earth that's referred to as the steampunk god world, in which the world is ruled by mutant gods. Which seems pretty neat, until this Charles Xavier comes along and he's totally evil and then takes mental control over all of the mutant gods. Xavier was unsatisfied with the gods who ruled over them, so he began to manipulate Storm. He made the gods slaughter millions of innocent people and cause natural disasters like droughts, which made the people of Earth rise up and fight against them, including the version of this Earth's Magneto named Magnus. Together, Together, Xavier and Magnus created the secret island of Utopia, a haven of science and technology for mortals. At some point he reveals the truth, freeing the gods from his control, but later would be killed by Magnus because of it. And at number 2, Nazi X-Men. Here we have an Earth 597, in which the X-Men are Nazis, all thanks to the Nazis winning World War II. They subsequently took over the world. The X-Men here are called the Reichmen, and consist of Banshee, Storm, Havoc, Psylocke, and Rogue. It is an Earth that appears in Excalibur Weird War 3, Volume 1, Issue 1 from 1990, where the Nazi universe begins to slip into the 616 universe. The Excalibur team end up having to fight against them, along with Herr Xavier, a German version of Professor X who resembles Joseph Mengele, one of the real-life Nazi scientists who was known for his cruel experiments on Jewish prisoners in Holocaust camps. Xavier creates mutants through horrible genetic experiments, including the Reichmen, so fits the bill. And finally, in at number 1, Sublime Beast. This version of Hank McCoy comes from Earth 15104, and he's a drug addict, among other things. From the mind of Grant Morrison, this alternate reality is from the writer's Here Comes Tomorrow story arc, in which we get to see a glimpse of a future timeline version of the X-Men. It's a post-apocalyptic world in which Scott Summers has abandoned his role as the leader of the X-Men, leaving Hank to take over, who ends up creating an army of cloned Nightcrawlers in order to take over the world. Hank's having some major trouble keeping things together, and he became incredibly stressed out, so he starts using a drug for mutants called Kick. Being vulnerable, he becomes the new host for Sublime, and wages a war against humanity. That's where the Nightcrawler clones come in. They're called the Crawlers. And in the process, he ends up completely destroying the Xavier Institute. 150 years later, he's still at it, wanting to completely wipe out other species that were not mutants. He manages to find the Phoenix Egg, and resurrects Jean Grey, aka Phoenix, who, seeing him as Beast rather than Sublime, acts as his minion, exterminating races in his name. He takes some of her DNA and duplicates her powers for himself, which then prompts Jean to remember who she is and purge Sublime from Hank's body. And at number 10, Mutant X Storm. Mutant X Storm is a mutant vampire. She goes by the name Bloodstorm. Classic. After being captured by Dracula, who wanted her as one of his brides, Storm is turned into a vampire. She gets her revenge though, aiding the X-Men in defeating Dracula, although she felt it was only right for her to leave the team now that she was infected with vampirism. Vampirism? Vampirism. And you know, bloodlust and what have you. Kinda would be problematic if you're trying to work on a team and you just keep trying to bite your peers. Imagine that wouldn't go over well. Later on, she would cross paths with Gambit, who pleaded with her to turn him into a vampire. So she agreed and she sired him, something that he would later resent her for in the long run. Moving on to number 9, Darkclaw. Darkclaw is the amalgamation of Batman and Wolverine from the Amalgam universe. So why is he scary and not just like totally freaking awesome? Well, just look at him. Debuting back in 1966, this character was a meta-mutant detective whose origin story is a combination between the two iconic characters' own beginnings. Logan Wayne witnessed his parents' murders as a child. When he grew up, he would join the Air Force and eventually was transferred to the Weapon X program. This is where he gains his Wolverine abilities, his adamantium-laced skeleton, and a supercharged increase in strength. Deemed a failure by those conducting the Weapon X program, he ended up going back home to New Gotham City and became Darkclaw, roaming the streets as a vigilante fighting crime. And at number 8, Storm Phoenix. Coming at you from What If Volume 2 Issue 79, this alternate version of Storm is a version that had the power of the Phoenix rather than Jean Grey. The Phoenix Force possesses her after a mission in space with the X-Men. When she comes back to Earth, she ends up creating a worldwide organization to protect the environment. Seems noble, right? But you know, she takes it a little too far. Instead of it just being a regular altruistic organization, Storm openly harms those opposed to her ideals, suspending them in animation up in the Earth's atmosphere, which you gotta admit is actually kind of a funny way to, you know, be like, you to somebody. Suspend you up in the air. She ends up freezing an entire community after they violate an anti-hunting agreement. Eventually Storm Phoenix is defeated thanks to Kitty Pryde phasing into her original body. But all in all, things could have escalated to much darker territory if she hadn't been stopped when she was. Moving on to number 7, the Red Queen. This alternate version of Jean Grey hails from Earth 9575. An alternate reality that's first seen in X-Men issue 5 from 1995. This Jean has been depowered thanks to previous crimes she's committed, and it's a little unclear as to whether or not she had access to the Phoenix Force in the past. Now, having been banished from her own Earth, Earth 998, she decides to reinvent herself by pretending to be a reincarnated version of Queen Madeline Pryor, her clone. From here, she embarks on a quest to become the Queen of Britain and eventually conquer the rest of the planet, and she had a plan to do it and restore her powers by finding various different iterations of Nate Grey from across the multiverse. She would essentially lure them onto her Earth, use them, drain them of their abilities until they died, and then, you know, just grab another one and use him. Eventually she tries this trick on the 616 Nate Grey, who ends up breaking free from her powers, which results in her draining all of the life force of the other Nate Greys in an attempt to defeat the 616 Nate. But eventually Nate creates a sun around her and burns her alive. And fun fact, later on in the 616 continuity, Madeline Pryor would actually begin using the alias of Red Queen, funny enough. She's like, I'm inspired. Moving on to number 6, Age of Apocalypse Colossus. Colossus of Earth 295 from the Age of Apocalypse Earth is not only frightening, but absolutely tragic. During the Age of Apocalypse event, he was forced out of retirement for a second time. The first was after he was so severely injured that he couldn't transform back into his human form, and was only kept together by Magneto's metal manipulation. The second time though that he came out of retirement was thanks to him needing to go on a very important mission to combat Apocalypse for Magneto. He and his wife Shadowcat led a team of mutants to save Colossus' sister, Ileana, who was the only mutant left alive with reality-traveling powers. In the process of rescuing her, he and Shadowcat abandoned their team, leaving them for dead. When he later learned that the reality that Magneto was trying to save with her powers and his plan was one in which Ileana was dead, he went berserk, going on a rampage that caused the deaths of several mutants, including his own wife. He was eventually killed by Gambit as a last resort in trying to control the mutant. And at number 5, Brute from Mutant X. Beast has had a handful of scary alternate versions, but this one looks like he crawled right out of a creature feature. Here we have Hank McCoy of Earth 1298, the Mutant X Earth, who is known as Brute rather than Beast. Brute came to be thanks to a series of deadly experiments that he conducted on himself, that not only changed him into this aquatic-esque being, which allowed him to breathe underwater, but also reduced his intelligence down to the level of a child in kindergarten. He is later further mutated, gaining hooves for feet. While he may not have his smarts anymore, the character does have a berserker streak, which when unleashed can be fatal for anyone in his way, especially considering his mental temperament. He's a bit of a tragic character as well. He was falsely accused of the murders of Green Goblin and Ben Reilly, and was executed for it. And at number 4, New Sun Gambit. From Earth 9921, we have this insanely powerful and terrifying version of Gambit known as New Sun. New Sun has control of kinetic energy on a molecular level. This means he can turn any object's potential energy into kinetic energy, which in turn makes it explosive. And it's a power without much limitations. He doesn't need to make physical contact with an object to do so, and can even do it to living beings, including humans. His total kinetic control can also stop motion, and he can simulate other kinds of energy with it, manipulating whatever kinetic energy is present in order to simulate energies like infrared energy, all by molecular agitation. In addition to that, dude can transform himself into an energy wave, which allows him to travel through space and into other dimensions. Plus, he's also killed his reality's Phoenix, which is no easy feat. He dies in Gambit Volume 3, Issue 23 when he's impaled and then explodes, which also causes his world to explode in the process. And at number 3, X-Men Forever Storm. The X-Men Forever Storm is also known as Perfect Storm, and resides on Earth 161. She's a clone of the original Storm who was created in order to restore the powers of heroes who were trapped on Genosha. But the clone became unstable, rapidly aged, and during an incident with the Shadow King, absorbed the darker, less friendly aspects of his personality, to say the least. She ended up becoming malevolent, and ambushed the X-Men team during a mission. She would then kill Wolverine and betray the team entirely, fleeing to Wakanda to seek out T'Challa's protection. T'Challa, who had previously been in a relationship with the regular Storm, believed that she was good, and saw that she was making an effort to help the people of Wakanda, changing the weather, helping the innocent, you name it. But eventually, after the two got married, Storm betrayed him too, letting Killmonger into their quarters, who killed the rest of the royal family and T'Challa, all so she could rule Wakanda. Moving on to number 2, the Age of X Cyclops. This Cyclops hails from Earth 11326, an Earth in which anti-mutant propaganda is on the rise, and anti-mutant protests eventually lead to the decimation of mutants by the US government. As you can imagine, Cyclops did not fare well in this socio-political climate. Scott operated under the name Basilisk, and after being captured by the government, his eyelids were removed in order to prevent him from having any sort of control over his optic blasts. He was then forced to wear a mask by the prison he was kept in, and was used by Alcatraz as a mutant executioner. Kinda dark. He eventually managed to escape and managed to save some of the other mutants in the process too, but he's forever haunted by the guilt of what he was forced to do, and the lives of innocent mutants that he ended. And finally, in at number 1, the Ruins Charles Xavier. I feel like anytime Professor X has an alternate that's evil, that particular Earth suffers big time because of it. This version of Charles Xavier comes from 1995's Ruins, one of the most depressing and dark alternate reality stories in the Marvel multiverse. Taking place on Earth 9591, this Charles was elected president of the US rather than creating the X-Men. He ends up becoming corrupted and set out on a political crusade against mutants. Despite having Warren Worthington Skeleton III as one of his security staff, although Warren kept his mutations a secret in general. Xavier creates a prison in Texas for mutants, in which mutants are deformed, experimented on, or tortured as a means of controlling their mutations, something that he states is done for their own good. And at number 10, Holocaust. I mean, his name enough should have you wary. Holocaust first appeared in 1995's X-Men Alpha, and is one of the Horsemen of Apocalypse. Holocaust was initially from the Age of Apocalypse timeline, where he was known as Nemesis, where he was said to be one of Apocalypse's children. Magneto would strip Nemesis of his flesh in a battle, enraged for the deaths that Nemesis had caused. His body was then retrieved by Apocalypse, who gave him to Dark Beast, who managed to capture his spiritual essence and put it inside a near indestructible crystalline exo-armor, a procedure in which Nemesis became Holocaust, or rather, Holocaust was born. This character is particularly terrifying for one specific reason: his abilities. He initially possessed the power to generate highly destructive bionuclear microwave energy blasts, which can be super destructive. And later on, when he became an energy being, he gained the ability to drain the life force from other beings in order to charge his own exoskeleton that acted as a suit of armor for him. He's pretty much physically invulnerable, or at least he was. The character was killed by Hyperion, who cracked open Holocaust's exoskeleton and then absorbed all of his bioenergy into himself by literally inhaling him. So that's a fun way to go. And at number 9, Krakoa. Krakoa is one of the X-Men's earliest villains, having appeared in Giant Size X-Men issue 1 in 1975. There's been 2 versions of Krakoa over the years, with the first being the villainous one. It appeared initially as a small island in the Pacific Ocean that was located near a nuclear bombing test site. The radiation from that test site mutated the island's ecosystem, which altered the island into a hive mind entity in 1945, something that Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos witnessed. They encountered much of the island's intelligence and established a peaceful treaty in exchange for keeping the island's existence a complete secret. Now flash forward to 1975. Krakoa decides it's hungry and it wants to feed on the life force of mutants, because I guess mutants are tastier than humans. It kills a young mutant team and later captures the original iteration of X-Men. This is what causes Professor Xavier to create the second wave of X-Men, the team that consists of Wolverine, Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Thunderbird, Sunfire, and Banshee, all to save the first iteration. Polaris eventually launches Krakoa into outer space, and later it becomes captured by the Stranger. Now this Krakoa is perhaps one of the most physically intimidating entities that the mutant team has ever fought. It is a literal monstrous island. The second version of it though, in case you're wondering, is much more benevolent, having been grown by a member of the Hellfire Club but wanting to redeem itself with the X-Men and become one of them. It ends up becoming a part of the school and even helps the X-Men financially by growing diamonds on a tree that it produces. Man, imagine having a friend who could grow diamonds on trees for you. It's the dream. And at number 8, Sauron. Don't be confused by its name. This is no Middle-earth Sauron. Luckily. Sauron of the Marvel Universe is quite different, despite being evil and having taken the name Sauron after the Lord of the Rings villain. Sauron is the alter ego of Carl Lycos, who has a Jekyll and Hyde relationship of sorts with this humanoid pterodactyl form of his. He's essentially an energy vampire who often lives within the prehistoric jungle known as the Savage Land. First appearing in this form in X-Men issue 60 back in 1969, Sauron was initially meant to be a giant bat-like creature, but back in those times, the comics code authority was still in effect, somewhat. And his creators Roy Thomas and Neil Adams inquired with the organization, who suggested that the character's vampiric traits would be in violation of the code. So instead of going with something that resembled a giant vampire bat, which was banned according to the code, they ended up opting out for a form that looked more like a pterodactyl. Anywho, what can Sauron do aside from look absolutely terrifying? Well, he's got all the superhuman fixings: strength, speed, stamina, durability, and intelligence. He flies, duh, has hypnotic eyes, fire breath, razor sharp claws, and most importantly, he can absorb life forces and mutant powers, and can sense mutants too. In addition to this, he can gain the powers of other mutants. Once, while battling against the Avengers and the X-Men, he was shot in the head by the second Black Widow, but survived thanks to having absorbed Wolverine's healing factor. And at 7, the Wendigo. The Wendigo is most well known in Marvel Comics for being the first foe of Wolverine's, the enemy in which Wolverine and the Hulk take on together. Based on the Wendigo legend of the Algonquin people, it's a large beastly creature with superhuman strength, stamina, durability, and agility. It has enhanced speed, hardened and sharp talons, and a regenerative healing factor. It's found in the woods of northern Canada and is the result of a curse that takes place under very specific conditions, primarily when a human in the forests feed on human flesh. Any of you familiar with the recent video game title Until Dawn may be familiar with the legends, although the Wendigo of Marvel Comics looks quite different than the video game's representation. Now over the years, the Wendigo has taken on its fair share of mutants, including Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Nightcrawler and the members of Alpha Flight. And the Wendigo isn't just one character either. Various different Wendigo have appeared over the years, all formerly humans who partook in cannibalism and have become these wretched creatures. In at 6, Predator X. Predator X first hit the panels of Marvel Comics back in 2007 in New X-Men issue 34. It is a grotesque beast, reptile-like, with superhuman strength and speed, sharp claws and teeth, toxic saliva, accelerated hearing, and its body is covered in non-toxic inorganic mercury. That latter bit means it is highly resistant to physical damage and can draw materials in the environment surrounding it to help reform itself. So why is it scary? If you aren't already kind of freaked out by it? Well, it can track mutants on their genetic signature and is pretty much tireless, meaning it can track its prey relentlessly until it succeeds, wearing down its target for as long as necessary. It can run at speeds of 199 kilometers an hour for a total of 19 hours straight before having to slow down. Luckily, its insides are not as durable as its outsides. Wolverine managed to kill it by tearing it apart from the inside out with his claws. But fun fact, it killed one of the villains that we mentioned on our part 1 list, Peeper, who it devoured on the side of a road. It's vicious to say the least. Predator X was created thanks to Stryker, who, prior to dying, requested that a living weapon be made in order to combat the coming of a mutant antichrist, aka Hope Summers. Moving on to number 5, Sugarman. Sugarman is by no means a good X-Men villain, but he is definitely a terrifying one to take in. First debuting in the Age of Apocalypse timeline, Earth 295, in Generation Next issue 2 in 1995, Sugarman would manage to sneak his way out of that reality and onto Earth 616, when bombs are blowing the crap out of 295 as a last resort means to be rid of Apocalypse. Sugarman, aside from being hideous and offensive to the eyes, is an expert biologist and geneticist. He has 4 arms, superhuman strength, razor-sharp teeth and claws, an indefinitely long bioelectric tongue, ew, an enhanced sense of smell, and has the ability to alter his body mass and size, which is actually how he sneaked his way over to 616, by hiding in Colossus' boot of all places. He's responsible for a handful of deaths on Earth 295, and when he arrives on 616, he ends up forcibly enslaving hundreds of mutants for the magistrates. The reason why he really ends up on this list? Just look at him. From scary looks to scary intentions, moving on to number 4, we have the Reavers. The Reavers are a team of criminal cyborgs who first debuted in Uncanny X-Men issue 229 back in May of 1988, created by Chris Claremont and Mark Silvestri. The Reavers, led by a man named Donald Pierce, are dedicated to the destruction of mutants, and specifically the destruction of Wolverine. Initially, they were a gang of looters who operated in Australia, but began to branch out when they used the mutant gateway to teleport across the globe in order to pull off more sophisticated robberies. The X-Men stopped them, with only a handful of the Reavers escaping that first encounter, later reassembling under Pierce, who takes the team into a more militarized direction, using them as an assassination squadron of sorts bent on taking vengeance on the X-Men. They've done some pretty messed up stuff over the years, including capturing Wolverine, torturing him, and crucifying him. They're an extremist team bent on eliminating mutant kind, humans who have become cyborgs as part of the cause. And they've even stirred up trouble in alternate timelines too. In Age of Apocalypse, they were a band of human traitors who served the titular villain, and in the Ultimate Marvel universe, they are human gladiators who have undergone surgery to become cyborgs, all for the purpose of hunting down mutants on live television. That's messed up. I mean, imagine running into a team of extremists like that who embrace technology in order to wipe out a race. Yeah, they're scary because they're a foe of the X-Men who are a little bit more realistic antagonists compared to some of their other enemies. We also got to see the Reavers make a cinematic debut in Logan, and needless to say they're pretty darn scary in their live action adaptation as well. And at 3, the Purifiers. The Purifiers are one step up from the Reavers, and are unsettling for very similar reasons. They're a paramilitary and terrorist organization, also created by Chris Claremont, that debuted in Marvel graphic novel issue 5, X-Men God Loves, Man Kills. And they are led by none other than Reverend William Stryker, who is their founder. So their whole shtick is that they're Christian fundamentalists who believe that they are fighting a holy war against mutants. They see mutants as the children of the devil and therefore need to be exterminated. In their first appearance, they abducted Charles Xavier and several members of the X-Men team, killed mutant children, fought against Magneto, and almost executed Kitty Pryde. Luckily for her, one of Stryker's guards grew horrified with his actions and shot Stryker, resulting in Kitty getting away and Stryker being sent to prison. That wasn't the last of them though. Even after Stryker no longer led the group, other successors took over the leadership mantle, including his own son, Jason Stryker. Later on, the Purifiers got their hands on Warren Worthington III's wings and used blood from them, extracted Apocalypse's techno-organic strain inside of them in order to graft it and then give to the Purifiers, giving them their own wings, a specific subgroup that would be called the Choir, whose whole MO was to, I quote, strike down Satan's spawn with God's own might. Archangel would later massacre all of the Choir minus 3 members. And at number 2, Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister is one of the most notorious X-Men villains. Sinister, aka Nathaniel Essex, first debuted as the employer of the assassin group the Marauders, mentioned in the Uncanny X-Men issue 212 in 1986, but first seen in the Uncanny X-Men issue 221, almost a whole year later. Not only is his aesthetic unsettling, but he's also capable of some really terrifying stuff. He's telepathic, telekinetic, has superhuman strength, durability, and longevity, can create concussive energy projections, and, potentially scariest of all, can manipulate his body on a molecular level. Born in 1859, he was obsessed with Darwin's theories and was considered an unorthodox biologist, conducting immoral experiments that would make him an outcast amongst his peers. He even dug up his dead firstborn child to experiment on it. After awakening Apocalypse, the villain would painfully transform him into an ageless being, with Essex taking on the name Sinister, which was the last thing that his wife called him on her deathbed. It's a wee bit masochistic, isn't it? And finally, in our number 1 spot, the Phoenix Force. One of the most terrifying foes that the X-Men have ever faced off against is the Phoenix Force, an entity that is an immortal and immutable manifestation of the universal force of life and passion, born of the void between states of being, the nexus of all psionic energy which does, has, and ever will exist within the Marvel multiverse. The Phoenix Force requires a host, and it manifested within Jean Grey, who, when losing control of it, became the Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix has a vast amount of abilities, is able to manipulate matter, energy, and life force, and has cosmic awareness, all of which makes Jean's Dark Phoenix incredibly powerful and threatening. In many cases, in alternate realities, Jean has completely wiped out the planet or consumed the universe when not stopped by the X-Men. And while much of the Phoenix saga has been retconned, along with Jean dying and coming back to life, and then dying and coming back to life again, the Phoenix Force has still proven to be rather deadly regardless. Over the years in the comics, the Phoenix Force has proven capable of taking on powerful foes like the Beyonder, absorbing stars for energy that creates supernovas capable of wiping out entire planets, and even flat out wiping out all of existence in What If issue 27 volume 1. I don't know about you guys, but to me that's scary as hell.
Number 10. Legion. Legion, aka David Haller, is the son of Charles Xavier and Gabriel Haller. He first debuted back in 1985 in New Mutants number 25. He is an extremely powerful mutant. Legion has a whole host of abilities, too many to name almost. Chief amongst them, telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, reality warping, and so much more. The only thing, David's not really fully in control of his powers. An Omega level mutant, when his powers first manifested, it was during a terrorist situation, and he actually ended up absorbing the mind of the lead terrorist, Jamal Tarami, which led to his mind splintering and him developing multiple personalities, each of whom controlled a different aspect of his powers. Legion started off as a villain of the X-Men, as he was quickly possessed by the Shadow King, as he was rendered catatonic shortly after his first true manifestation of power. David is also responsible for the Age of Apocalypse timeline, when he went back in time attempting to kill Magneto but killed his father instead, creating that horrifying branch of reality. Part of what made Legion so dangerous was his insanity and unpredictability as a result. However, over the years, David has metamorphosized into somewhat of a hero and has gained more control over his powers, partially through training and partially through tech. However, with a character like Legion, there's always the potential that his grip on his personalities could slip, and he could find himself a menace to the X-Men and the world once more. Also, watch Legion on FX, it's great. Number 9. Danger. Danger is the manifestation and personification of the Danger Room. Now, even if one is only casually acquainted with the X-Men, they most likely know of the Danger Room, the training space that pits the X-Men against all kinds of, well, dangerous obstacles to hone their skills. However, what they may not be aware of is this plot. Due to lots of backstory, Xavier found himself updating the Danger Room with Shi'ar tech. However, as he did, it posed him a question. Where am I? This led Charles to realize the room was sentient. However, he also needed a space for the X-Men to train, so he decided the best thing to do was cover it up and tell no one. The Danger Room was then utilized and destroyed when the mansion was attacked, the various times that's happened. And after one such time, Danger began to seize control of the other machines in an attempt to escape and forge a body. First, Danger coaxed a student to suicide, then managed to build a female body, take on and defeat the X-Men in her quest to kill her father, Xavier. Danger spent years seeking revenge, building new bodies or possessing others, like the Omega Sentinel. She was made all the more dangerous by her intimate knowledge of the team's weaknesses and fighting styles. However, ultimately this character became an ally to the X-Men. Sometimes you just gotta get over all that dark stuff Xavier does when writers want to introduce conflict into the story. That's how it goes. No matter how scary you are, turn good, you get bumped down the list. Number 8. Arcade. Arcade first appeared in Marvel Team-Up Volume 1, number 65 back in 1978. Now Arcade has no powers, but you don't need them to be a scary or a credible threat. Arcade has a genius-level intellect and a penchant for murder that has led him down the path to be a hitman, but he doesn't just kill people. No, he makes them work their way through elaborate arenas of his own design in his amusement park-inspired murder world. Arcade never seems to have a hard time kidnapping people either. You're living your life 1 minute, next, boom, you're in murder world. While Arcade has gone up against many Marvel heroes, he has had many notable encounters with the X-Men. When possible, he likes to get people in pairs to make more interesting, like Gambit and Wolverine. The rooms will be designed with a myriad of traps and dangers to test the specific occupant's skill set and mental fortitude. Now, some may be like, scary, but you may change your tune if you woke up kidnapped in Murder World. Number 7. David Moreau. David Moreau is yet another normal human, but is on here for the effect he has had on the X-Men verse. Moreau is also known by the name the G-Engineer. He first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 236 back in 1988, and was allied with the island of Genosha, a land whose prosperity had been built on the backs of mutant slavery, which had been made possible thanks to Moreau's invention of a mind control device. He also invented the mutate process, wherein 13-year-olds were tested for the X gene, and if it was found, they were turned into mutates, with their memories erased and rendered completely obedient. Now, Moreau can't get all the villain cred here. His mission was helped along by tech given to him by a villain who was in part 2, the Sugarman. The Sugarman had obtained a version of this tech from his reality, that being the Age of Apocalypse, and that version of Mr. Sinister. Still horrifying stuff, and a threat to not just the X-Men, but mutants everywhere. Number 6. Nimrod. Don't let the name fool you. Nimrod is a force to be reckoned with. First appearing in 1985 in Uncanny X-Men number 191. Nimrod comes from the now famous Days of Future Past storyline, a descendant of the robotic hunting machines, the Sentinels. His name is actually a biblical one that means mighty hunter. The fact that it translates to a playground insult years later, that's not his fault. Nimrod was created by the Sentinels to be the ultimate mutant hunting weapon, and he is nigh invulnerable. After some time travel, he decides that he doesn't need to eliminate all mutants, just the X-Men, powerful ones who are outlaws, who have an impact on the timeline. It's very Terminator-esque, and that's terrifying. That scene in the first Terminator where it's coming down the hall towards them dragging its foot and it seems slow, but then it pans out and you see how fast it's really moving, that still messes me up. That scene and the sound of it dragging its foot, just the... Number 5. Archangel. Warren Worthington III gets to be so high up because of just one impact his villainous turn made on X-Men history, and it's a great storyline. Warren was one of the original X-Men, a founding member from all the way back in X-Men number 1 in 1963. Warren always had a complicated relationship with his mutation, the wings of an angel, or at least it seems that way now. At first he was a stereotypical air character, then he got broody when things got angsty in the 80s. Warren's descent towards villainy began with X-Factor, a group Warren was backing, which ends up getting viewed as mutant hunters for hire, and after he is exposed as the backer, his wings are mutilated and develop gangrene, leading to them needing to be amputated. Warren is devastated and commandeers a jet that has been sabotaged to blow up. He doesn't know that. Before it does, he is transported away by Apocalypse, who offers him a spot as a horseman. Apocalypse performs extensive genetic alterations that change Warren's appearance and give him metallic wings, and for a time, he was the Horseman Death. Manipulated by Apocalypse, he turns harshly on his friends. As Archangel, he was a force to be reckoned with, and his path towards redemption and occasional slips back make for good reading. The design is great, those sharp metallic wings, and again, he's someone who knows the team's weaknesses. He is good currently, which, well, bleh. Give me back my Archangel. Number 4. Mastermind. We're talking about the first villain to have that name, who was instrumental in the Phoenix arc. This character first debuted in 1964 in X-Men number 4, and for our purposes we need Jason Wingard. Mastermind has the power to cast illusions, vivid and realistic ones, that he uses to manipulate people to his whims. He can also alter people's senses, how they feel, what they see, and most importantly how they perceive him. He likes to up his handsomeness game. What makes him so formidable is that he can even affect powerful telepaths, such as Xavier and most notably Jean Grey. This occurred during his association with the Hellfire Club. He at first uses his powers to pose as Nikos and initiate a romance with the help of Emma Frost. He is then able to convince Jean that it was Victorian times and they were married, and that she was the Black Queen. Mastermind doesn't make it, but his legacy lives on, as does his creepy mind manipulation plot. Scary, to be made to think you live in a bodice ripper. Mental manipulation is scary stuff. Number 3. Strife. Okay, so some explanations, but the Cliff Notes version. Strife is a clone of Cable, who first appeared in 1990 in New Mutants number 86. Strife was raised by Apocalypse in the future for the purposes of being a host body. However, Apocalypse decides against it once he realizes that Strife is a clone, as he thought he had the real Cable, but he was wrong. Strife's contribution to this list is the Legacy virus, which was first Legacy 1, then Legacy 2, but would eventually mutate into Legacy 3. The virus was set to target mutants when their X gene was activated, which would ultimately cause the body to stop being able to produce healthy cells and lead to death. But before the end, the victim's powers would go haywire, causing much damage to those around them. Strife took his time perfecting this virus, that's why there's multiple versions, except for 3, which was a mutated version that could infect everybody. Number 2. Cassandra Nova. This is a more recent character appearing in 2001 during the new X-Men number 21, as an antagonist to the X-Men and Charles Xavier specifically. So bear with me, because it's gonna get a little zany. Cassandra Nova is Charles Xavier's twin, sorta. But she was conceived without a body, and copied one from Charles in the womb. However, Charles sensed her terrifying thoughts, again in the womb, so he strangled her, and she was stillborn, but her essence survived. Eventually, she was able to build an all-new body. She is Charles's opposite, a dark mirror. Her first act to announce herself to the X-Men was to kill 16 million mutants on Genosha in a mass mutant genocide. As a Mumadrai, Nova was meant to have to wrestle with Charles for control of his body, but thanks to his mutant abilities and hence hers, she could build her own. She has psychic powers compared to Charles, plus telekinesis, phasing ability, the ability to create psionic armor and block attacks, and a hate-on for the X-Men. It's just a lot. And number 1. You guys have been waiting for it. You're excited. It's Proteius. Proteius debuted in 1979 in Uncanny X-Men number 125. Proteius was meant to be one of the strongest mutants ever conceived. Born as Kevin McTaggart, he is the son of longtime X-Men ally Moira McTaggart. However, Kevin's powers are so intense they cause him to crave energy to replace what he has expended. In fact, he's actually made of pure energy. His mother had to keep him in containment to protect him and others, but he eventually escaped and put his powers to use, which includes body possession, so he can hop from host to host. He also has psionic energy composition and reality warping abilities that he can actually control. Before he was known as Proteius, he was known simply as Mutant X. So because of the fact that he exists in a pure energy state, the bodies that he hops into, he uses them up pretty quickly, and Proteius normally just burns them out. He could leave before he kills them, but he just doesn't. He also has access to all their memories even after he's left, and has hopped into some of the X-Men's bodies. He's been known to melt buildings, reverse gravity, stretch people into liquid, and more. Basically whatever he can imagine, he can do. He eventually became able to possess multiple individuals at the same time and travel interdimensionally. He's even attempted to bring the astral plane into normal reality. His powers are out of control. The fact that they defeat him at all is a minor miracle each time. Proteius is terrifying in the scope of his power and the fact that really you can't get rid of him.
And at number 10, Barnacle. Barnacle was a character who first was introduced in 1999 in X-Men Magneto War issue 1. He's a mutant terrorist who has one of the nastiest powers, moisture solidification. He can initiate a chemical reaction that turns moisture into a solid shell, which he uses for various things. It can contain a person in a constructive turtle-like shell with their own bodily fluids, ew. He can create indestructible armor for himself, and he can spray a stream of hardened barnacle crust through the air, also ew, because it most likely comes from the moisture in his own body. Super gross. He once tried to screw with Storm and her claustrophobia by encasing her in a hardened shell, but luckily Nightcrawler was there to intervene. Dude is just flat out nasty. And at number 9, Deadbolt. Deadbolt is another smaller villain to make our list, and aesthetically is a very different kind of scary in comparison to our last number. Deadbolt is a living skeleton, contained with an energy field, who could remove pieces of his bones to use as a weapon. His body would immediately regenerate if he did, meaning I guess he's got an arsenal of bone weapons for eternity. He was a member of the Dark Riders, an organization that worked for X-Men Big Bad Genesis. He was initially seemingly killed off by Wolverine, but later it was revealed that one of his fellow Dark Riders was the culprit behind his death. His skull is also split in half, creating devilish-like horns atop of his head. And he's definitely not the kind of villain I'd want to run into in the middle of the night, that's for damn sure. And at 8, Peeper. Peeper, aka Peter Quinn, is one of the weirder villains on our list. He was recruited by Magneto to be a member of the new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but was abandoned with his new teammates when failing their first mission together, and getting defeated by Captain America. From there, he and his band of rejects became the Mutant Force and worked for Mandrill, which also got them arrested. Then, after that, Red Skull became their new sponsor. Years later, he would die at the side of a road, being devoured by Predator X while screaming. So if anything, based on all of that, Peepers doesn't actually seem all that scary now, does he? But in terms of his appearance, those large, eerie eyeballs of his are super unsettling. They give him various optical powers, including telescopic vision, microscopic vision, X-ray vision, and optic blasts. I do not want to know what he uses the X-ray vision for. No. And at 7, Onslaught. First appearing in X-Men Volume 2, Issue 53 in 1996, Onslaught is a sentient psionic entity created from the consciousness of two of the most powerful mutants, Charles Xavier and Magneto. During a prior battle, Xavier would become catatonic when using his abilities to shut down Magneto's mind. He was prompted by Magneto ripping the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton. Yeah, I could imagine why that would piss him off. This caused the darkest parts of Magneto's mind to enter into Xavier's consciousness, merging with the hero's own darkest tendencies, everything that he had repressed for the last 30 years, which eventually grew into an individual persona, otherwise known as Onslaught. After he was defeated the first time, his consciousness lingered, and he would later return the Onslaught Reborn storyline, the brand new but equally scary form. And at 6, Zorn. Zorn is a bit of a confusing character thanks to a series of retcons surrounding him. He worked as a teacher for the Xavier School of Gifted Youngsters, but then it was revealed that he was actually Magneto all along. At this point in time, the metal manipulator was dead. But then it was retconned yet again, revealing that Zorn was just a Magneto imposter and not actually Magneto himself. Lisai. Anywho, the reason why he gets a spot on our list is thanks to his dandy little helmet. It's a skull-like helmet, which is scary on its own, but it's meant to contain massive amounts of energy coming off of Zorn's head. He has a star for a brain. I mean, man, like if I saw someone who had a star for a brain, no bueno, avoiding that dude. And at number 5, Dark Beast. Dark Beast is an evil alternate version of Hank McCoy from Earth 295, the Age of Apocalypse reality. Because of Charles Xavier's absence, this version of Hank disregarded all sense of ethics, becoming a mad scientist who worked under Apocalypse. He would conduct cruel and unusual experiments in Apocalypse's name, and even managed to escape that reality before it imploded, showing up on Earth 616 and becoming quite the threat to the X-Men and Hank, and the 616 Hank while he was present. He's 20 years older than the 616 Beast and therefore isn't as physically strong as his counterpart, but still gives him a run for his money. Plus he's villainous, so you know, putting all that brain power to evil uses is not a good thing. Moving on to number 4, Mojo. Mojo is one creepy fella. First appearing in Longshot issue 3 in 1985, Mojo is an absurdist parody of network executives. He's part of an alien race known as the Spineless Ones, and is the dictator and a slaver of a dimension he rules called the Mojoverse, where all of the dimension's inhabitants are obsessed and addicted with Mojo's Gladiator television programs. When he was created by Ann Noceti and Art Adams, Noceti specifically requested that Adams make Mojo as disgusting and unpleasant as possible. He's got wires that hold open his eyelids, inspired by a Clockwork Orange. And because of his large size, he rides around on a multi-legged flying platform that's armed with a bunch of deadly weapons and particle beams. In addition to his mastery of manipulation and several of his powers being derived from magic, Mojo is also able to generate an anti-life force field that makes him capable of killing things simply by touching them. He can wither plants and age humans. And at 3, Apocalypse. Apocalypse is one of the X-Men's most fearsome foes. He's an ancient evil, the first mutant, who is practically immortal and sees himself as the father of mutant kind. He operates under very Darwinian principles, believing in the survival of the fittest, killing off the weak in order to make the survivors grow stronger, for the betterment of humanity. He considers himself the apocalypse of the modern man and the father of what humanity will become, mutant kind. He fully believes that what he is doing is the right thing. He's ensuring evolution. Minus how terrifying his ideologies are, his abilities are, intense too. The ones at his disposal are tremendous. He has self-molecular control, a genius-level intellect, he can manipulate matter and energy, he can shapeshift, is capable of accessing astral planes, is telekinetic, telepathic, is a technopath. He can augment the powers of other mutants and transfer someone's consciousness into another being. In all of his appearances over the years, Apocalypse has always been one of the most physically intimidating villains in Marvel's comics, and considering what he's capable of, it's definitely not hard to find the character downright horrifying. And at number 2, Emplate. Emplate may not be as well known of a villain as our previous number, but he's arguably physically more frightening. Emplate is a mutant who physically looks like an emaciated corpse with purple artery-like veins running across his gray flesh. He is not a looker, that's for damn sure. Emplate first came to be in Generation X issue 1 back in 1994, and when his mutant powers first manifested, he was overcome with hunger and killed his mom because of it, causing his father to kick him out. Emplate, who back then was known as Marius St. Croix, sought out the dark arts out of a desire for more power. He would later be rejected by his sister as well, who he would magically trap inside of the form of a mute creature with razor-sharp diamond-hard skin, Penance. While he's only fought the X-Men a handful of times, his powers are not to be taken lightly. He has the ability to siphon mutant energy from bone marrow of mutants. If he siphons all of their energy, they die. While he's feeding from them, he cancels out their powers and often takes on some of his victims' attributes. If he feeds on them multiple times, he gains their powers permanently. So he's basically a mutant vampire. In addition to this, when he feeds, he achieves a measure of psychic control over his victims' minds, making them his subordinates. Scratch that, he is the mutant Dracula. And finally, in at number 1, the Shadow King. The Shadow King is one of Charles Xavier's consistent foes. He was a human mutant from Egypt with vast telepathic powers, which he used for evil, eventually taking on the alias of the Shadow King. Through retconning, he was made into an ancient evil entity. Aside from his bone-chilling appearance, this character scores the top spot on our list thanks to his possession abilities. While in the astral plane, he can possess other beings and control them. So he's basically like a monster out of a horror movie. He's an astral entity who preys on the bodies of highly skilled and powerful psychics, which he then uses to enslave others with. In the Shadow King's native form, he cannot be harmed physically, and he has lived for over a millennia. Generally, the Shadow King is depicted as a large creature with purplish skin, glowing red eyes, sharp claws, and even sharper teeth. Luckily, in order to exist in reality, the Shadow King needs a host, and if that host is killed, it will disperse the Shadow King's astral essence, which can take up to months or years for him to remanifest in his astral form again. Thank God.